You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Thank you for watching us here at Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with me today is Dr. Venosa. Thanks for coming out, Joe.
Thank you, sir.
So we want to talk a little bit about the Planning and Zoning meeting that happened last week. The results of that. The City Council had a meeting this week. Unfortunately, there wasn't any votes taken based off of the recommendations that came from Planning and Zoning. Is that accurate?
Correct.
So we want to lay some of the groundwork. We want to explain some of the details. And it's a couple layers, and I think if we take our time, I think we can get through that, maybe help bring anybody who's kind of new to this topic up to speed. Mm-hmm. But they're talking about the CBD, the Central Business District in Salisbury. So what is that, and what is that a part of?
So it's a designation that most municipalities have regarding the location of core activities, business activities, things of that nature. And obviously, with regard to Salisbury, for downtown Salisbury, it's historically been a part of a broader comprehensive plan that any city would have.
Like if they want to use it for retail or
restaurants
residential areas.
Residential, yeah.
How many, right?
Exactly.
Now, right now, currently, our resident rate is 40 units per acre.
That's the density rate. Yeah.
That's the density rate. Now, the last year, the developers that came, they wanted to move it up to 77. Is that right?
Yes, it was 77 per unit.
And the city council decided no.
And the zoning board, I believe, last year also said
That's right.
no. Yeah.
But it got appealed in court. Is that right?
And it was thrown out as well.
Okay. So right now we're at 40 units an acre. Mm-hmm. It was asked to be 77 in 2023. Mm-hmm. Was turned down, and was also upheld in court.
Correct.
Right now, just at the planning and zoning meeting we had last week, again, developers asking for a text amendment. And my understanding, that means, hey, listen, we're actually going to change the code. This is not just for Joe's property. This is for all property in the CBD, the Central Business District, right?
Correct, yeah.
And this would actually move it up to 80.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So you and I were at the meeting, and several, it was
well attended.
Well attended. Yeah. Lots of folks signed up to speak. It's a very long meeting, right?
5 hours, I think, from start to finish.
Very long. It seemed very coordinated, didn't it, Joe?
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
What was your...
Well, I'm going to make the observation, that, and others have said this too, but essentially, if you watch it, it seems that the votes and the discussion and the meeting format were predetermined. In the sense that it was very scripted. There were no real opportunities to really debate and analyze the issue. And I think a lot of us in the community, and again, for clarity, we all have our bias and view. I think most of us are not against density. The issue is how it's being done in this way. The fact that there seems to be a lot of ethical concerns and conflicts of interest at play with certain members of the Planning and Zoning Board, with local developers. And it sort of left a lot of people with just a bad taste in their mouths in terms of how things get done by entities that are supposedly there to represent all of us.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how things get done.
Sure.
Planning and Zoning is one of really the only committee that is actually shared between Wicomico County and the city of Salisbury, right?
Correct.
And they have 7 members.
Yes.
Now, the 7 members, Chip DeShiel, Matt Drew, Danielle Moreno-Holt, Deshaun Daugherty from the Salisbury City Council President, Joe Holloway, who's a Wicomico County Councilman from District 5, James Thomas, and George Mandel Copeland.
Yes.
They're the 7.
They are the ones who vote, yeah.
So if you'd gone to the meeting last Wednesday, you would have seen those 7 folks sitting up at the front. Now, the Salisbury City staff, they have, Henry Ure, he went up and gave the report from the Salisbury City staff. So there is a staff there as well.
Correct? That assesses all of these proposals. Yeah,
okay.
Correct.
So if you'd gone to the meeting, you would have seen Salisbury City staff.
Yeah.
You would have seen the members of the Planning and Zoning, including somebody from the Salisbury City Council and the County Council.
Yes.
Their job is to hear out to vet out these issues, right?
Correct.
So in this case, we had a developer, Brad Gillis, asking to increase the density to 80 units an acre.
Right.
Now, tell me a little bit. I mean, they read the entire
Yeah.
report from the staff
Yeah.
verbatim.
Verbatim.
So what was the tone of that?
Sure. Well, first, shout out to Mr. Henry Ure for having to read that all. That's quite the tall order. I think it clocked in at about 22, 23 minutes. But the DID report essentially laid out, what the proposal is from Gillis Gilkerson for these. I believe the entity they've created for this project is called Salisbury Townhomes LLC. This is for luxury housing in the Central Business District. But he laid out in that DID report all of the pros and cons and the concerns. And one of the things that was constant in the report was the fact that a lot of things that the initial effort to change density last year haven't been addressed.
Which was like sewer
issues,
water.
the water. More importantly, you could argue, though, the impact on city services more broadly. For
Like
fire, EMS services, police, all these things are going to have an exponential cost to the city that hasn't been factored in. And so if you listen or read that report, what their argument is that they're not necessarily opposed to it, but they are opposed to it in its current form and basically advised that they have a more collaborative approach with the city to actually address those concerns.
So infrastructure could include fire service. It also can include sewage, but also parking, right?
Parking is a big aspect of it as well, correct.
And it does not seem as if the parking plan for this is from a public standpoint is easily viewed. I mean, there's a parking garage that's going to go in, but
they haven't actually given the details on that. A lot of it is speculative. Even in an interview that Brett Gillis gave, I think to WMDT a few weeks back, he basically said it's an evolving project, but didn't actually give the details of what that evolution on parking would necessarily entail.
Well, and one of the questions that's come up, and we don't know, we haven't seen it, is a traffic study.
Yeah,
no
traffic study.
They did not present this at the Planning and Zoning. And the Central Business District in Salisbury does have more than one entry and exit, but it's not flush with them. There's pinch
it's very
points.
limited, yeah.
I mean, you had the river.
Yep.
Some of the bridges many years ago were removed, and some of those areas you can't just get a fire truck in from a direct standpoint, correct?
Yeah, correct. It's a physical problem that has yet to be dealt with.
So the Salisbury City staff report seemed to not favor this development at this time.
Right. It wasn't a rejection of it, but it said in its current form, which is essentially just piggybacking off last year's proposal, but having more density. Yeah. Again, that's a bit strange, but that was sort of the core of their concern if you listen to that report.
But on the other side, the Greater Salisbury Committee has submitted a white paper in support of this.
Correct.
Now, I think one thing we need to discuss, because, so maybe you could explain, what is the Greater Salisbury Committee? What's their role in this?
So the official line that we hear from its members or its spokesmen or its proponents is that the Greater Salisbury Committee is a group of local businessmen who are giving back to the community by promoting projects and issues that are in the broader civic interest.
And their history, by and large, shows many great things that have been accomplished through their group.
They've been around since 1967, and they have advocated for some things that you could make the argument have been positive for the community, and things that you could argue have not.
I get the sense now, though, attending county council meetings, and you attend most every city council meeting, that a lot of the times they spend their efforts promoting things that would benefit folks from within their own organization. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the personal belief that the Greater Salisbury Committee is simply a local lobbying organization in which it's certain members that have very clear financial interests in certain projects push local government toward those policies that would benefit them.
Well, so on the planning and zoning, I mean, to be fair, you have 4 current or former Greater Salisbury Committee members on the planning and zoning.
Right.
Chip DeShiel, Matt Drew, George Mandel Copeland, and James Thomas
Right.
are either current or maybe somehow lifelong members of the Greater Salisbury Committee.
Correct. And from certainly my view, and I think other people, we feel that that's a very big ethical concern, coupled with the fact that another member of the Planning and Zoning, Mr. Deshaun Dowdy, is himself an employee of a developer who spoke in favor of this at Planning and Zoning, which means you could make the argument that 5 of those members have either personal business interests or just associations that don't necessarily look particularly ethical.
And I think, if they're going to be on on the committee and discussing a project that would either directly or indirectly have a positive impact on their business or a business that's a part of a group that they're a part of, then it should be stated. And
Yeah.
so the city staff report went against it. The white paper went for it. Joe Holloway was the only person in the end who voted against this text amendment from the Planning and Zoning Board. Is that right? It went 6-1.
Correct. And I think this is the thing that the public needs to know. What Mr. Holloway suggested, right, was simply that we table the text amendment to discuss it and examine it in more depth. And what effectively happened was the chairman, Mr. Chip DeShiel, and others effectively shut that down and muscled it through. Now keep in mind, they rejected an even less ambitious project last year. So why the change now with no real explanation is the concern.
Well, and I actually have another concern. When we talk about the comprehensive plan, the current comprehensive plan for the city of Salisbury, it does not show this project in its current form.
Not at all.
And we don't know from that comprehensive plan where the parking would potentially come from.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the statements that's been made is, well, let's build it and we'll make adjustments. We'll see how this goes.
Sure.
Can we afford to do that?
Well, I don't think we can, but keep in mind too that this text amendment doesn't just apply to the one project in Lot 10. It also, in Lot 1, I believe the downtown. It also applies to the Lot 10 project, which is this new supposed hotel that they're planning to construct. So this text amendment has real ramifications to all aspects of downtown life. And so it's going to have a fiscal and a logistical impact that I think people don't really appreciate.
Well, I'm a county resident. I don't live in the city.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think, well, hey, I live out in the country. What difference does it make? But one of the points that's been brought up to me is, hey, do you ever serve on a jury? Do you ever try to go downtown to pull a permit or to look up tax records at the government office?
Or to use the library, right? Well, it's still there.
While it's still here.
Right.
Again, we reference back to the Greater Salisbury Committee, and we're not trying to bash them. What we want to know is what's the whole plan.
Yeah.
Talk about the library in instance. I mean, they're also part of the group that's very in favor of moving the library out of downtown. Right. So, you're building all these apartments while you're also moving their library out from that area, right?
Well, it seems like there's a kind of identity crisis that's always been an issue, right? Is what do we want our downtown to be?
Okay.
And the different interest groups periodically kind of shift their own positioning on it, it would seem.
Okay. So we're at a point where Planning and Zoning has sent this to basically the Salisbury City Council. They have not done that yet. We don't know if there'll be another work session with the Salisbury City Council or if they'll go to a vote at the next meeting. But I want to spend some time to really talk about what folks out there would do if they see this video or if they've been reading about it in the papers and they're concerned. How would they still make their voice heard? I think we should take a break. When we come back, let's shift our focus on to what folks can do to at least make their opinion, whatever that might be, make sure it's impactful and heard.
Great.
Right. So when we come back, we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about what you can do to be involved and make sure that your voice is heard. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Nestled along the banks of the Wicomico River, just 3 miles from downtown Salisbury, Pemberton Historical Park provides a window into 18th century plantation life on the eastern shore. In addition to the restored colonial plantation buildings, you can also discover 4.5 miles of walking trails, brackish water marshes, forests, open space, and scenic views of the Wicomico River. Also available are picnic areas with grills, fishing ponds, public restrooms, and a nature center. The 900-acre plantation known as Pemberton Manor was purchased by Isaac Handy and his wife, Anne DeShiel, in 1726, 50 years before the United States became a nation. They thereupon began building the now restored manor house known as Pemberton Hall, which was completed in 1741. With the skills and labor of approximately 20 African slaves, the Handy family grew tobacco for export to England, as well as a variety of food crops for their own consumption consumption and for shipping to markets up and down the eastern seaboard. They also operated a lumber mill, maintained fruit orchards, made cider and brandy, and milled grain. Additionally, the Handys were part owners of several ships which were used to transport the plantation's bounty to faraway markets. Throughout the 1700s, tobacco was the plantation's primary cash crop. The dried tobacco was packed into large barrels known as hogsheads, which were rolled down to Mulberry Landing Wharf at the water's edge over what was known then as the Rolling Road. The hogsheads of tobacco and other plantation products were then loaded onto scows and moved to ships anchored in deeper water for transport to their destinations. The driveway used to enter the park was once part of that rolling road, and at low tide, you may be able to see remnants of the Mulberry Landing Wharf, which was built in 1746 and is the oldest documented bulkhead wharf in the United States. By the 20th century, the manor house, Pemberton Hall, had fallen into disrepair and by the 1960s had become uninhabitable. But in 1963, the decaying buildings were transferred to the Pemberton Hall Foundation along with 262 acres of the plantation's original acreage. After doing meticulous research, the Pemberton Hall Foundation restored the manor house to its original condition, right down to the paint colors and furnishings. Pemberton Historical Park is open all year from dawn till dusk. The Manor House is open to the public on the first and third Sundays of each month from May through October, between the hours of 1 and 3 p.m. Private tours can also be arranged, and several public events and festivals take place at the park from spring through fall. For more information, visit the Wicomico County Recreation Parks and Tourism website or PembertonHallFoundation.com. Back to you, Joe.
Welcome back to Open Agenda. In the studio with me still is Dr. Venosa. Thanks for sticking around. So really want to lay the groundwork on what's the future of this text amendment.
Sure.
So that folks, whether they're in the city or in the county, can really understand where they stand, right?
Sure.
That's very important to us.
Very.
So the Salisbury City Council is made up of 5 folks. They're all elected out of different districts. Michelle Gregory, Sharon DeShiel, Angela Blake, April Jackson, and Deshaun Dowdy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I pronounced his name wrong. He's the county or the city president.
Yes.
City council.
City council president. Yes.
So there's 5 on the city council. At some point in December, it's likely that they're either going to have a work session followed by a vote, or maybe even possibly go to a vote. Their meetings are on the second Monday of the month.
Yeah.
So the next one is December 9th at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Their meetings are always at 6 p.m.
Always in
correct?
the evenings, yeah.
If folks can go, there's comment section.
Yeah.
How does that work there, maybe versus how the county council works? Is it early in the meeting or?
It varies based on what's on the agenda, but typically they're a little bit more stringent as to you as a public speaker in putting your name and your address. So when you go in, they really do sort of have an order where you go in and you say your name. At the county council meetings, they tend to do it as, okay, if you want to come up and speak, come up. You don't really have to write in the form.
But you still can go up there.
You still can go up there, absolutely.
So our understanding is it's likely that Michelle Gregory and Angela Blake are actually in favor of this text amendment. Is that?
Oh yeah, I would bet the farm that Michelle Gregory, Angela Blake, and the city council president Deshaun Dowdy are absolutely going to vote in favor of this. They have been unequivocally clear in promoting not just what they see as development, but what I would see as developer interests.
So, I mean, Joe, I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
It almost seems like, well, it's a lost cause, right? But it's not.
It's not, right. And okay.
So Sharon DeShiel is very likely to vote against this. So from what we understand.
That's my understanding,
I mean, look, she's free to change her mind.
Sure.
So is
yeah.
everybody else.
Correct.
April Jackson has said that she is very, she's looking to get some feedback from her constituents. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think if you're going to frame it as a current city political dynamic, she seems to be the one sort of swing vote. Now, she's on record as having voted against the sale of these parking lots in the past and has been against the density changes in the past. So whether or not that will remain consistent, I think it's anybody's guess. But for our viewership here, it's important to consider that even if, let's say, the city council passes this, the mayor may choose to veto it.
Okay, and he's on record as maybe not being very favorable to this. Is
This
that correct?
particular project in this way, yeah. He has been, and he ran on this. To his credit, he ran on being much more critical about the selling of city assets and changes to density and zoning.
So if it does pass, but at a 3-2 vote, the next likely scenario is it would go to Randy Taylor's office. He's the mayor of Salisbury.
Yes,
And he would have the option to veto it.
he could. Right.
If he does veto it at a 3-2, now it would go back to be overridden. They would have to vote again.
They would have to find a fourth vote.
Yeah.
They have to have a 4-vote majority to override his veto.
So I think it's really important here. I mean, this is one of those times. It's like you can lose, but you can win. And
Yes.
more importantly, there's time for folks to get their voice and opinion out there. Most certainly, many folks came out to the planning and zoning meeting.
Well over 100 people attended at the start of the meeting.
Yeah. I mean, 5 hours is a pretty long.
Well, they cut us down as the hours went along. You know,
Yeah.
people have to pick up kids or go to work or whatever. But yeah,
But there is still time to go to city council. Is it even worth, you think, for folks to reach out to the county council?
it is always worth any citizen reaching out to your elected officials, because even if it may not go your way, you're using the opportunity to have your voice heard. You know, and especially when elected officials understand that there's some pushback and that there are public concerns, even if they may be in favor or against the topic, they may at least have some more nuance to it, and they may try to address aspects of it.
It was interesting. I was talking to one of our county council members who was talking about a topic at a board of exceptions had. Now it's kind of like a wing of planning and zoning, and they elected in that situation to grant an exception. But one of the things he was really adamant about is you can put restrictions on things. You can say, hey, listen, yes, you can have this text amendment. Yes, you can have this exception in this case, in the case he was speaking of. But there are other restrictions. But it would take people reaching out to them, correct?
It would. It would take public engagement, and it would take, obviously, more advocacy to our elected officials.
And I think it's also important to understand, too, whether you're talking about the city council or the county council, many of those folks are elected in a district, but they still represent the entire entity.
Yeah.
And that's what they'll tell you.
They will, and that has been one of the great things that we have seen, at least in the last few elected cycles, is that the officials, even if they are representing just officially District 2 or District 4 at the county or city level, they will very openly tell you, I represent everybody because I'm on the city council or I'm on the county council. So their concerns and their focus doesn't end with the district lines.
So April Jackson, at the last city council meeting, she elected to share her phone number. And I think we're going to post it here. It's 410-726-8478. Now, we're not asking you to harass her at any point. That is not what we want. But Ms. Jackson did say that she's always been open to get the feedback of her constituents.
Absolutely.
But I think this is really where there's a lot of nuance here. One, although she has a district in Salisbury, she'll tell you that she represents the entire city.
Yep.
But also, too, even if you live out in the county, unless you're going to never go into Salisbury, which is really not possible if you're going to serve on a jury or go pull a permit or go pay your tax
Pay
bill.
a bill, yeah.
This is going to impact you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And rather than just say, well, yes, maybe it does seem predetermined, I think it's really important. We have seen when we've spoken out against parks or for parks or different types of government structure, budgeting, it's really important that people hear from you, right?
Yeah. The more public momentum on any issue, whether it's for something or against something, is going to have an impact, because in the end, our elected officials are there to represent us. And by making your concerns known, they at least have an awareness about what the mood of the public is on any given topic.
So what do you hope that you see come out of this situation? What's more information you want to have public before the final vote gets taken? What are you looking for?
Well, personally, as a city resident and taxpayer, I'd like a better sense of what the actual long-term costs are going to be on this change to the density code, because reading over, and it's easy to miss because Mr. Ure really had to read a lot of stuff that, in some ways could be a little bit bland and bureaucratic. But that report's numbers are important because it really lays out what it will cost in terms of the financial aspects and the personnel aspects to have these new developments in the city. And one of the things that we constantly talk about in the city, and in the county to a lesser extent, is this idea of affordable housing. And nothing in the current density change has anything to do with affordable housing. The project itself is listed as luxury housing. And so when we have city residents who are struggling to pay their bills, who can't find decent rental or homes to buy, it's an affordability crisis as much as anything else. And that hasn't been part of the conversation. There's been this very, very tepid lip service to, well, we'll just increase the supply and things will sort themselves out. The housing market really doesn't operate only on market forces, though. It never has. And so if you are a city resident like I am, the big concerns that a lot of us have is, what is this project going to actually do to the viability and the affordability of those that currently live here?
Well, we talked about, we had Ms. Hillegas on last week, and she stated very plainly that more inventory would help drive prices down. And that may be even have some effect in a positive way. But one of the things that came out of Mr. Ure's report from the city was talking about the sewage capacity. Now, there's lift stations right outside the central business district that actually kind of lift the sewage up so that it can flow downhill down to the treatment plant. This project would actually put one of those two lift stations at capacity. Now, when you then max that out, my question would be, what's the plan to increase capacity for the next business development?
Right.
And could you explain a little bit about who's Holly Worthington and what is their stake in this?
Sure. Well, Ms. Worthington has been sort of one of the principal organizers against the density changes. She's the principal owner of Worthington Realty downtown in Salisbury. Her office operates out of the old synagogue. That's there on the corner. And she and other merchants have basically had real big concerns because not only is this density change going to have a huge effect on what remaining foot traffic we have there, but to the employees and to the other residents who already live downtown, there are concerns about their access, their parking. She mentioned at the city council meeting yesterday, which would be, for those watching, it would be November 25th, that she has at least one resident in her building who is wheelchair bound, who is worried about access, right, to actually getting to their apartment, because if these changes go through, how are they going to actually physically access their home?
Because it's not part of a bigger plan that it's accessible by the public.
Correct.
So I think when you're taking, whether yourself or as a city resident, or myself as a county resident, or Ms. Worthington as a business owner down there, you're really just looking for, hey, what is the entire plan and what will be our contingencies of some of these unintended consequences?
And that's the thing that's troubling, because the only real contingency that was offered, and it was somewhat vague, but at that meeting for planning and zoning, you had an official representing the state say that we're going to have access to a $500,000 grant to sort of help this process. The timing of that announcement in that meeting was a bit suspicious, right? Because no one in the public had been aware of that, right? That seems sort of an odd place to mention at the time that you're trying to sell this plan. But it also doesn't necessarily mean much, given what we're facing with these actual calculated, or I should say compounded costs. $500,000 state grant might help, but if we're going to be in the hole for multiple millions of dollars that then the city is on the hook for.
Well, and again, this is a promise for $500,000 from an entity that is $2 billion in the hole.
Right.
This
2.7 billion.
Well, 2.7, but
Yeah.
who's counting
What's 700 million between friends? Yeah.
I've spoken about this at the county council meetings. I think the hardest pill to swallow is you don't have the whole plan in place. Right. We don't know exactly all of the infrastructure costs. It doesn't fit into our comprehensive plan that we paid a lot of money to have. Right. And then on top of that, we really don't know where the state stands with some of the funding that they have given us historically. And it could come in pulling back things like disparity grant. Yeah. It also could come from new unfunded mandates.
Yep.
So as taxpayers in this county, in the city, I really think now is the time that if you don't get involved now and just ask questions, then when the tax bill comes due, that won't be the right time to start asking questions, right?
It won't, because we've gotten to this point in the city where we run now at a structural deficit, right? Because we have given away certain city assets over the last 10 to 12 years. We have basically given away or developed subsidy programs that have given city revenue away to a small amount of people. And if you are, quote unquote, a regular homeowner, or a renter for that matter, you're on the hook because those costs get passed down.
Yeah, we've already seen attempts by a county executive to bust the revenue cap. Our appointed delegate has stated that he's interested in removing the revenue cap.
Yeah.
Our state doesn't know how much money they have or how much more tax money they're going to need.
And we're looking at, again, possible tariffs at the federal level. So you tell me, how does that look for basic cost of living?
So now would be the time for people to get involved.
Now would be the time.
The first Tuesday of December is county council meeting. That one happens to be at 6 p.m. I would suggest people go to that. And then the city council meeting is
Monday,
December 9th,
December 9th,
6 p.m.
as
right?
well. Yep, absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining us for this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back next week with another new episode. Have a great weekend.
Oh, they're going to love this when it airs.